I think we're all faced with great opportunities brilliantly disguised as impossible situations.
Dr. Joe Dispenza is a best-selling author, writer, speaker, and pioneer in merging science and spirituality. He helps us demystify the mystical and explore what it really means to be a human being.
If you're not waking up in the morning and being a creator, then more than likely you're going to be a victim to your life. So the experiment is, how do you believe in that future more than you believe in your past? So when the person says, I've been addicted to anger or frustration my whole life, well, get ready. The moment you say, I don't want to be addicted to this, the war's on. And the body just says, you can start tomorrow. You're a failure. You'll never change. If you're willing to sit in that emotion, what happens afterwards is truly insane. Some people spend their whole life dreaming in lack and never actually realizing their goals. They're waiting for their new relationship to feel love, or waiting for their success to feel empowered. And when you create from wholeness instead of lack and separation, you see it not only affects in their biology, but ultimately affects in their life. The possibilities are endless if you can get a person into the right state. We've figured out a formula to be able to help people to go through those different stages. It's not that complicated, so let's make it super easy and super simple.
Dr. Joe.
Hey.
So happy to be here with you.
I'm so happy to be with you.
The more that I've dove into your work and also studying the self through the myriad of conversations I have in this podcast, I really come to see how, and also in your work is reflected so much so, how addiction lies on a spectrum. And perhaps the most fundamental addiction we have is to identity and to our personality structure and its corresponding biological pharmacology. Are you familiar with dissociative identity disorder? Have you looked into it a little bit?
Sure, I know dissociative.
It's so interesting to me, and I've been diving more into it recently, how essentially an individual with this disorder can have the experience where you have multiple personalities, you have as few as 2, up to 100, and the corresponding personalities will correlate to different behavior and a completely different outlook on life, on self. Some will be left-handed, another personality will be right-handed. Some will need glasses, some will have diabetes, some will be allergic to peanuts, another won't. And it's so interesting, and it points to how ephemeral our personalities are. And so I'd love for you to reflect on that, because as we start to dive deeper into who we are in our true self and our true nature, we see how our personality, as you really state so beautifully, creates our personal reality.
Yeah, so let's start with a very simple understanding. Your personality is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. So the present personality who's listening to this podcast has created the present personal reality called their life, not their mother, not their ex. They're responsible for creating their life. And if they think the same way, they act the same way, and they feel the same way, they're the same personality. And of course, they'll have the same personal reality. And I think most people try to create a new personal reality as the same personality. And it doesn't work. We literally have to become someone else. So then, if the majority of our thoughts are the same thoughts based on memories we have of experiences in our life, the moment we start remembering our problems, we're thinking in the past, right? So those memories have a feeling or an emotion associated with them. So the moment you think about your problems and you feel unhappy, not only is your brain in the past, now the body's in the past. So it's that thought and that feeling. It's the image or memory and the emotion. It's the stimulus and response that's immediately conditioning the body to memorize that emotion. Now the body is literally living in the past because it's so objective. It doesn't know the difference between a real life experience that's creating that emotion and the emotion that person is fabricating by thought alone. So to the body, it's in the past experience 24 hours a day. Okay, so now the body physiologically is now in the past. So then the hormones of stress create the emotions of anger and aggression and frustration and impatience and competition and hatefulness, and fear, anxiety, worry, insecurity, envy, jealousy, guilt, unworthiness, shame, suffering. Those are all derived from the hormones of stress. Turns out when that response switches on, when we perceive a threat or a danger in our outer world, the response from whatever condition in the outer world gives the body an arousal. And so then if you keep doing that and you keep giving the body a rush of energy, the body becomes dependent on its external world to feel something. So the arousal from your coworker, from your ex, from traffic, from the news, something in your outer environment is producing that kind of addictive rush of energy. Then people begin to use the problems and conditions in their life to reaffirm their addiction to that emotion. They need the bad job, they need the bad relationship, and they become addicted to the life that they don't even like. And so an addiction is something you think you can't stop, or an addiction is something you know that is not good for you, and you do it anyway. So people are unconscious to the fact that the arousal from the stress hormones is knocking their brain and body out of homeostasis. It's knocking it out of balance the majority of the time. So we can actually think about our problems and create the same physiological response as if we were being chased by a predator. So what was once very adaptive becomes very maladaptive. So you turn on that response, you can't turn it off. Now you're headed for disease, because stress is when the body's knocked out of balance and there's no opportunity for the body to return back to balance and order. That imbalance becomes the new balance, and that's when we head for some type of disease or imbalance in our bodies. So then those emotions that we feel tend to drive our behaviors, and we behave as if we're in the past. And if those emotions are just really chemical records from past experiences, then we probably more than likely remember the past instead of remember the future. So 95% of who we are becomes, an automatic set of programs in our personality. So if we really teach a person how to think differently, how to act differently, and how to feel differently, give them new information, have them learn that information, have them teach that information back to somebody so it's wired in their brain, have them understand exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it so the how gets easier, remind themselves enough time to install the circuitry so that they have neurons and circuits in place to make a different choice, to do a different thing, create a different experience, and feel a different emotion. If you change your personality, would your biology change? The answer is 100% absolutely yes. And we can do it in 7 days. Now, a person with a dissociative disorder or multiple personality disorder had traumas in their life, most of them, from childhood, and the way they coped with the constant abuse was that they would just dissociate from this world and go to another world. And they would live in that world and create a different character than the character that's being abused or molested or whatever. And so each one of those different personalities, just like creating a new personal reality, takes 7 days. They've been doing that for so long that the myriad of personalities of thinking differently, behaving differently, and feeling differently produces immediate biological changes where the person is allergic to peanuts in one personality and not in the other. So in a sense, that speaks to human potential, because that's exactly what we're doing when we see people heal from chronic health conditions. I ask them, where is the disease? Where did the disease go? And 100% of the time they say, it's in the old person. I'm no longer that person, I'm somebody else. So of course the disease would exist in a different person. It's a different physiology. So teaching a person after years of thinking, acting, and feeling the same way, running those programs, teaching a person how to become so conscious of their unconscious thoughts, so aware of the defaulting habits and behaviors, and to notice when they start feeling different emotions, that you got to catch yourself from going unconscious and returning back to that person, for them to unlearn and relearn, to break the habit of being themselves and reinvent a new self.
So as we continue to dive deeper into the science, spirituality, and mechanism of this transformation, I love how you're pointing to the personality structures correlate to the emotions that we're addicted to. It's not necessarily the substances in and of themselves, but also the emotions behind them that we crave. And so can you speak to the mechanism of how we become addicted to the emotions and we expect and crave for more of that familiar sense?
Yeah, I think that most people get so used to feeling a certain way that they don't think on any other level they can feel a different way unless there's crisis or trauma or disease or diagnosis, when there's betrayal, when there's loss, when there's something that happens that all of a sudden the feeling changes so much that nothing's making that feeling go away. And the moment you don't feel like yourself any longer, you can really see yourself really clearly through the eyes of someone else. And in neuroscience, that's called metacognition, to be able to become conscious of our unconscious self, so conscious that we don't go unconscious in our waking day. That's how people change, you know? So the stronger the emotion we feel from some challenge or problem in our life, the more altered we are inside of us. If some event occurs and our chemistry changes, the moment there's a dramatic change in our chemistry, that's the moment the brain freezes a frame and takes a picture, it takes a snapshot, and that's the memory that's embossed in the brain. What the person doesn't know, that the arousal of those chemicals, giving the body a rush of energy to be more alert and be more aware, they keep reviewing the problem 50 to 100 times, ruminating over the problem again, and they're producing the same chemistry over and over again to the body, and the body, in a sense, is getting a rush by thought alone. So now it becomes addicted to its own thoughts, right? This gets really kind of wild because you're not aware that you're doing that, but you're giving your body energy. And so the side effect of it then is the body is dependent on that thought. In fact, if you reasoned with me and you said, I really don't like to suffer, I don't really like to feel like a victim, I don't want to feel unworthy, I want to change that. And everybody goes, with their conscious mind, yay, let's change it. And so you say, okay, well, if I'm suffering and I'm, in pain and I'm a victim, well, victims, what are their behaviors? Oh, well, they complain, they make excuses, they judge other people, they feel sorry for themselves, they need a lot of attention. I don't know, I'm making stuff up. But that could be a behavior that goes along with a person who suffers and feels unhappy most of the time. And then what are the thoughts that you think? All right, so you could be really, really ambitious and say, I'm going to just stop today. And the first couple hours goes by really well. But as you see the same people and you go to the same places and do the exact same thing at the exact same time in your life, it's no longer that your personality is creating your personal reality. Your personal reality is reminding you of who you are as a personality. The environment is regulating and controlling the way you think. So every person, every object, everything, every place has a neurological network in your brain. You have a neurological network for your mother. You have a neurological network for your enemy. You have a neurological network for your coworker because you've experienced them. So in a sense, we're seeing reality through the lens of the past. We're seeing reality as a memory to a human being. So they think and act the same way around that person because they've done that around their spouse for the last 30 years. And they feel certain emotions that they respond to in certain ways. And the stronger the emotion we feel, the more we pay attention to the person or problem, and where we place our attention is where we place our energy. So everybody's attention is being divided on all these different elements in our life. Okay, so the person says, I'm not going to complain, I'm not going to blame, I'm not going to make excuses, I'm not going to feel sorry for myself, I'm not going to feel unhappy, I'm not going to feel unworthy, I'm not going to suffer, I'm going to catch myself thinking these thoughts, and first couple hours goes by really well, but the body's the mind. The servant is the master. The person thinks they're making all their choices with their conscious mind, but they're not. Their body mind is looking for the familiar feeling to keep them in the known, keep them in the past, right? The familiar past. So 2 hours goes by and the body says, I've modified my receptor sites for suffering. I got more, I'm looking for those chemicals. It's the chemical continuity is being broken between the thinking and feeling loop. And the body just says, okay, come on. You can start tomorrow. You're a failure. You're never good at this. You're too much like your father. You'll never change. This isn't right. You got to do something differently. All of those thoughts are being driven by the body. And the person 2 hours ago had the intention that they weren't going to do any of these things. And now the war started. Because in addiction now, if you can't stop it, right? Now it's telling you that the body's dependent on the familiar feelings of the past. The body wants to stay in the past. So it starts to inform the brain, think the same way so you can make the same choice, you can do the same thing, create the same experience, you can feel the same emotion. You go, my unhappiness feels so good. I'm so happy to be unhappy because the unknown is just a dangerous and scary place. That unknown is when the body's stepping outside of its comfort zone, of its predictability, right? It's unfamiliar. There's discomfort. And so the discomfort of being in the unknown causes the person to return back to the same person. So crossing that river of change from the old self to the new self, there is a neurological, a neurochemical, a biological, a hormonal, a genetic death of the old self. And we see it, and there's dissonance that goes on in the brain. The person's not firing the same circuits, and they're inhibiting the thought that's going to produce the chemical. They're observing it and not responding to it, believing in it. And it takes an enormous amount of energy, an enormous amount of awareness to stay conscious. And people think they're doing their meditations wrong when they go unconscious. No, you're doing it right. The only way you become conscious is to catch yourself thousands of times for going unconscious, and you'll never go unconscious again. That's the overcoming process. And it turns out that it's the overcoming process that is the becoming process. So when the person says, God, I've been addicted to anger or frustration my whole life, well, get ready. The moment you say, I don't want to be addicted to this, the war is on. The war is on because the body is going to find a reason for you to be angry. It's going to tell you, oh, this is a good reason. No, there's too much traffic, you're going to be late. It's, oh my God, I can't believe this person, whatever it is, right? So then the cravings that take place when you're willing to sit through that emotion in your meditation, this is why it's so valuable. Because if you're sitting in your meditation and your body's getting aroused, that's perfect. That's perfect. That is the animal that's impatient, that's frustrated, that wants to get up and do something. And you're telling the animal to stay. You're telling it to sit. And it usually gets its way. So it starts assaulting the brain. Turns out if you're willing to sit in that emotion and keep lowering the volume to that emotion, keep taking your attention off that person or problem, keep watching the body get aroused and settle it back down, and stop siphoning energy into the emotions of the familiar path. Keep doing that. Sooner or later, like training an animal, the body's no longer going to be the mind. And when it realizes it's no longer the mind, there's going to be a tremendous liberation of energy. And now the person's relaxed in the present moment, in the unknown, and that turns out to be a really great place for people to create in.
It's beautiful in the way that you put it, how we're on this continual journey in our life of remembering and forgetting, until we start remembering more than we are forgetting. And I love how you break down how we're going to continually consciously find evidence for whatever we're subconsciously programmed to find and we're emotionally familiar with. Mm-hmm. And this invitation that you have to flip it on its head, where the persistence of this delusion is astounding, how we continually look for an external reality to fulfill us internally. And I mean, it's so easy to continually fall into that trap, thinking there's something out there that is going to satiate me internally. And you're inviting us to flip it on its head and to go to the source of our internal reality that will then become the match to the external reality of whatever we're trying to achieve, accomplish, transform health-wise, monetarily, relationships in any degree.
Yeah, well, I want to be super clear. I mean, we have bodies, we have vehicles, we have senses, and we're here, so separate from anybody or anyone, anything, anywhere, anytime. We have the free will to create reality. We're souls on the journey, right? So you need a body to experience three-dimensional reality, and there's so many wonderful things to experience in this three-dimensional reality that we should. I mean, I love great wine. I love great food. I love nature. I love being human in my animal self, to be part of this species of humans. I think we're incarnated for that, right? The problem is that we reach a point in our life in the plane of demonstration, the plane of doing, where we realize that we have to do a lot of things to get what we want. In other words, you have a thought that you want a new career or a new relationship or a new, you want to be abundant or you want to be healthy or in shape or whatever it is. And you become aware that you're Andre, local in space and time. And then you think about your dream or your vision, and our mind automatically calculates and predicts how long it's going to take for that to happen. And so here's one point of consciousness, then the future is the other point of consciousness, and the separation between 2 points of consciousness in three-dimensional reality creates time. So in order for me to get that thing. I may have to work harder. I may have to sacrifice and save money. I may have to cheat. I may have to compete. I may have to steal. I may take on a second job, whatever it is, borrow money to have that experience, right? So it takes time and energy to finally arrive at that event. Now, when the event occurs, the emotion from that event takes away the lack or separation from not having it. That's the prize in three-dimensional reality. But some people spend their whole life dreaming in lack and never actually realizing their goals, right? So they're waiting for their wealth to occur to feel abundant. They're waiting for their new relationship to feel love. They're waiting for their healing to feel gratitude and wholeness. They're waiting for the mystical moment to feel awe. They're waiting for their success to feel empowered. They're waiting for something to change in their outer environment to take away the lack or separation from not having it in their inner environment. So for the most part, they're living by cause and effect. So what do you do when you're matter trying to change matter? You work harder. You try harder, you force, you control, you manipulate. That's what matter does when it's trying to change matter. And so we're rushing constantly in separation for the experience that produces the emotion or the feeling that takes it away, okay? And you can get really good at doing this. You can get really good. You could get trained, you could take courses, you can get coached, you can learn from your mistakes, you could have great parents, whatever it is, you could develop really good habits. And sooner or later, you get better at doing it in a shorter amount of time. Well, that's great. That's really cool. My interest is to teach people, well, gosh, can I actually go to a place where I am a creator? Can I really think about with a clear intention what that future looks like? Could I train and teach my body emotionally what that future feels like before it happens? Now, that goes against a lot of hypnosis. That goes against a lot of programming, because the programming says you need this thing in your outer world to take away the feeling of even drugs, to take away the pain or whatever it is, right? So we've become very dependent on the outer world to change our inner world. And all I'm saying is it's possible then, if you can teach people how to be creators in their life and change the way they think and change the way they feel and feel the emotions of their future before it happens. The cool part of that is that when you're feeling the emotion of your future before it happens, you're not looking for it any longer. Why would you look for it if it feels like it already happened? So then when the synchronicities, when the coincidences, when the serendipities, when the opportunities start showing up in a person's life because they're changing the way they think, the way they act, and the way they feel, they get more involved in the creative process. They're saying, I actually am creating this. Get really good at it and learn how to be a creator in the present moment, in the unknown. Create from the field instead of from matter, instead of three-dimensional reality. If it's not matter that's creating the field, but the field that's creating matter, if I could change the information in the field, can I change the hologram or the slowing down of frequency into matter? And could I shorten the distance between the thought of what I want and the experience of having it if I create from the field instead of from matter? Now that's a whole new experiment, right? Because we got to get retrained, we got reconditioned, we got to change a lot of beliefs about that. We got to explain what that field is. We got to teach people how to get beyond themselves and take all of their attention off their body, off of all the elements in their environment, and not think about the predictable future or the familiar past, to disinvest all of their attention, all of their awareness, all of their energy off the particle, off of matter, off of the physical three-dimensional world. And if it's particle and wave, put all your attention on that wave function. And that wave function, there's nothing physical or material there, so it's nothing. I don't know how else to explain it, but it's energy and frequency. If you have a person pay more attention to that nothing and teach them that it's rich in frequency and energy, to feel it, to experience it, to relax into it, to become more of it and less of them, somehow there is this dramatic change in the information in a person's biology. So then when you create from wholeness instead of lack and separation, and you teach people how to do that, I think you see it not only effects in their biology, but ultimately effects in their life.
So much of your work also in the book and just the statement that you are the placebo is pointing directly to this, how we are creators and beneficiaries of life and not victims, which is something that we're continually told and fed that narrative of.
Oh, that's a tough one.
We'll go into it. I would love for you to share exploring how different brainwave states correlate to different states of consciousness, and how acknowledging and shedding some awareness on this insight feeds into where we're going here.
Sure. Well, it's not that complicated, so let's make it super easy and super simple. We're sitting here. There's Andre over there, separate from Joe Dispenza over here, and I'm local in space and time, and everything around me is separate from me, right? So when I plug myself into three-dimensional reality, my receptors that plug me into three-dimensional reality, what's getting information from the outer environment are my senses. So what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, what I'm smelling, what I'm tasting, what I'm feeling, all my five senses plug me into this three-dimensional world. And it's a lot of information for the brain to integrate. The brain's job is to create meaning between what's going on out there and what's going on in here, right? So then when we're paying attention to all the elements in our environment and we're awake, the brain kind of beats in this wavelength that's called beta brainwave states. And we're in beta right now. We're relaxed, we're present, we're paying attention to each other. There's no threat, there's no danger around. We can learn. We can gain information from the environment when you're present and paying attention. All right, if I said to you, oh, Andre, we decided that we're going to give you a test to take. At the end here, it's going to be 100 questions. And we're going to show your viewers if you passed or not, right? Your brain would kind of perk up a little bit more. You get a little bit more aroused and you'd be like, okay, I'm going to lean in now and I got to really pay attention. So that when the light bulb gets a little bit brighter, you move into mid-range beta. And like, that's a good state to be in. Like if you're getting ready for a podcast, you're going to deliver a lecture, you're going to see somebody you haven't seen for the first time or meet somebody new, whatever it is, you're a little bit more alert, right? When you're angry, when you're fearful, when you're in pain, when you're judgmental, when you're frustrated, resentful, whatever that is, your brainwaves move into that aroused high beta brainwave state. And that arousal is stepping on the gas really hard. And when we go into the high beta brainwave states, most of our attention, because of the arousal, is on our body. Like, wow, I feel really physical. I feel like matter. I feel like my body. I am my body. The arousal of those chemicals causes but all of our attention on the outer environment. What's the environment made of? Bodies and people and objects and things and places. So now more of our attention is going on the outer world. And when you're being chased by T-Rex and you got to go from one point of consciousness where you are to the cave, another point of consciousness, you're thinking about time. And you're trying to collapse as much time as you can by increasing your speed, right? So the brain always is forecasting the future when it's aroused by these chemicals. So high beta means it's very high frequency, pay a lot of attention. And now if stress is created from not being able to control something, not be able to predict it, or the perception that something in your environment is going to get worse, the arousal of those hormones causes us to be uncertain. We're in the unknown, and we begin to think about all the people and objects and places that are known to us in our life. And the neocortex is a reflection of everything known in our outer environment. It's the autobiographical self. So as you start thinking about all the people and the objects and things and meetings and places and what could happen, this could go out, and the brain starts going in this high beta states, and the waves of the different parts of the brain start beating out of order. And like a lightning storm in the clouds, the incoherence in the brain is causing the waves to interfere, and the energy in the brain begins to go down. It's a destructive interference. And some people then, they keep it aroused. They just keep driving the sports car on the freeway in first gear, and they become dependent on something out there that's going to make that feeling go away, whether they're scrolling through social media, whether they're getting on the phone and complaining to their best friend, whether they're watching a game or video gaming, whatever it is, they're reliant now on their outer environment to change their inner environment. Sometimes pharmaceuticals and sedatives and alcohol and drugs or whatever it is, makes the person feel better, right? So they need something exogenously, externally to change their internal state. And we get very narrow focused. We get over focused. We get obsessive. We're looping really hard when we're in these high beta states. And we discovered that when people analyze their problems, within that disturbing emotion, 100% of the time, they make their brain worse. They're driving the brain further and further into high beta because the arousal of those emotions are causing them to think in the past. And the thought of whatever it is producing the chemistry to arouse them even more, and they're on the hamster wheel. And the brain gets very disintegrated. And it sends very disintegrated signals to the different systems of the body, and that's what stress is. Stress is autonomic dysregulation. Okay, so how do you teach a person how to slow their brain waves down where they just don't go from that beta brainwave state or high beta brainwave state to delta, sound asleep, because they're so exhausted? The body never has a chance to go through these healthy stages of brainwave changes. So in beta, in low-level beta, and mid-range beta, and high-level beta, your outer world is where most of your attention is. You're on your body, you're paying attention to your body, to your environment, and time. Okay, we discovered if we tell the person to go from that kind of narrow, obsessive focus on everything physical and material, everything known. Okay, let's do the exact opposite. Let's have them broaden their focus and focus on nothing physical and nothing material, that void, that vacuum. The act of sensing nothing somehow causes you to stop analyzing and thinking. And if you stop analyzing and thinking, you start slowing down this thinking neocortex that plugs you into three-dimensional reality. And the brain waves start slowing down a little bit more. And if you do this, and you can teach a person how to relax when they do this, the brain begins to go from that voice that's talking to you in your head all the time, that's chattering to you. Those critical facilities tend to quiet down, and the brain naturally starts to see in pictures. It's in images. It's an imaginary state. And now the inner world starts becoming more real than the outer world, and the person starts thinking about possibilities, about new things. The brain is in a state of creation, right? It's in a more creative state. If you keep sensing space, and people understand that that space is not just nothing, it's frequency and energy, and they start paying more attention to it and less attention to them, they get beyond their body, their environment, and time, and they become nobody, no one, no thing, nowhere, and no time. In other words, no attention on their body, no attention on the people in their life, none of the objects, their cell phone, or whatever it is. No place they need to be, place where they sleep, place where they're sitting, and not even think about time. That is the moment that they become pure consciousness. And when they're sensing that space, the different compartments of the brain that were modulated and compartmentalized and not talking to each other, communities broken, fragmented from each other, a house divided against itself, the incoherence, all of a sudden, by sensing that invisible field of unifying energy that exists beyond our senses, those different compartments of the brain that were subdivided begin to synchronize. And now what syncs in the brain links in the brain, and those different parts of the brain start unifying into bigger communities, and you start seeing the entire brain in a cascade of rhythm, global alpha coherence. And that's a really orderly signal that's sent down the nervous system that's sending coherent information to all the cells and tissues in the body, and the body's returning back to autonomic regulation. Now, here's the fun part. We push people on those 7-day events way past where they normally would stop. That's where the magic always happens. Get a person to get so comfortable sitting down. Instead of laying down and going from beta to alpha, theta, boom to delta, let's teach them how to get into each one of these states. Okay, now the person can sustain alpha for a beautiful period of time. They're not trying to do it. It's just their brain's resonating in order, and the energy in the brain starts to build. And so energy drops out of the thinking brain and starts building in the limbic brain. Now you're moving into theta brainwave states, and theta is a hypnotic state. Now, the whole purpose of meditation is to get beyond the analytical mind. And what separates the conscious mind from the subconscious mind is the analytical mind. So 5% of our conscious mind working against 95% of what we've programmed subconsciously. The only way you're going to change it is to get in the operating system. You can't do it in beta. You're separate. Slow your brain waves down and let the body start to move into a light rest where it starts almost falling asleep, and keep the person conscious and awake. And now the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious wide open to information, right? Now there's just a hypnotic state, and you're suggestible to whatever you think, you'll accept, you'll believe, You'll surrender without any analysis because the analytical mind is suppressed. And it's that thought, that intention that literally programs the autonomic nervous system to make a pharmacy of chemicals equal to the intention as information the person is thinking. Now you're in the operating system. So in theta now, this is where the person can start relaxing into their heart. This is what we discovered. Teach a person how to practice relaxing into the heart. The more relaxed they get into their heart, the more they do that, the more they're moving out of survival. And the heart is the creative center. The more energy that gets to the heart, we see this beautiful dance, like grabbing a big sheet of bed sheet and going like that. The heart sends a wave right to the brain, and it tells the brain it's time to create. And the brain moves into these beautiful, beautiful coherent states. And somehow the heart resets the baseline for the emotional trauma that the body's been living in. It just says the event is over. The experience is done, the trauma's done, and all of a sudden, the body can finally free itself from the past. And once that happens, energy moves into the heart, more energy goes into the brain. And as a person keeps doing this, and keep relaxing into the heart, moving into theta, the autonomic nervous system now is getting really, really hot, right? Lights are out in the thinking neocortex, what plugs you into three-dimensional reality. And now they're still suggestible to information, but their eyes are closed. There's music playing in the background. They're not eating, they're not tasting, they're not moving. There's no hypnotist giving them information through their senses. If the nervous system is coherent and it's highly organized, there comes a moment where the nervous system can read information from that unified field of energy that exists beyond our senses. And when there's a match or a harmonic or some type of resonance that takes place, we've seen this so many times. The brain goes into these very high states of coherent gamma brainwave states. Not a little bit of gamma, not a lot of gamma, a supernatural amount of gamma. And the arousal now that the person is having is not fear, it's not anger, it's not pain, it's ecstasy. The arousal is bliss. The person is feeling connected to something really great. And the autonomic nervous system now, which is now controlling, coordinating every other system down to the cell in the body. The whole entire autonomic nervous system has got these really fast, compressed gamma brain waves, and the frequency is really fast, which means there's a lot of information, coherent information, traveling to the cells, and the cells are getting lifted by information or by light. And many times when that occurs, there's an instantaneous biological upgrade that takes place. Like there's the eczema, now it's gone. There's the Parkinson's, now it's gone. There's the blindness, now it's gone. There's the stage 4 cancer, now it's gone. Energy is informing matter, and as you get closer to source, closer to that unified field, the more wholeness is being reflected in a person's biology. So gamma then is superconsciousness, and delta is deep sleep. When we take the information in the plasma of the blood of people who hit that state, there's information in the blood that somehow stops a SARS-CoV virus from entering the cell. There's information in the blood that somehow takes 70% of the mitochondrial function out of cancer cells, that downregulates the Alzheimer's gene, that produces endogenous opiates, 100% of the people, that causes genes to be regulated in the most unbelievable ways, that causes the microbiome to dramatically change in 7 days. There's factors in that blood and information coming from that field reflected as wholeness that somehow is causing neurons to grow, new neurons to grow. The body is pro-life now. The body is pro-growth. It's moving back into wholeness, you know. So we look for those kind of states where the person hits that moment where they're sustaining this state of gamma, and the beauty behind it is that as the person is relaxing into their heart and the brain is starting to change, we start seeing this beautiful state where for many people the delta brainwave is a harmonic that's carrying alpha, which is a fractional harmonic that's carrying alpha, and alpha is carrying beta, and beta is carrying high beta, and high beta is carrying gamma, and gamma is going into super high gamma, and there's waves upon waves upon waves, fractal patterns of order, and that's called resonance. And when the brain is in that kind of mathematical resonant state, microclusters of neurons all of a sudden start forming macro clusters of neurons. And now they're exchanging more information at a greater level of consciousness. And we've seen certain people, like if we're sitting here talking, if we had a brain scan on, you'd be using maximum 7% at a time of your brain. Your visual cortex, your association centers, your motor cortex.
You don't know me, bro.
Little firing. Well, for us, okay, here and there. We see 26, 27, 28% of the brain recruited in this state of, stingingly high levels of order. So we've kind of figured out a formula to be able to help people to go through those different stages. And Delta, of course, is deep sleep. And I used to think it was deep sleep, and now I don't know anymore because we see people really awake in Delta too.
So I recently just came back from your 7-day retreat, which was a beautiful immersive experience. Happy to share more about it. When you were talking about this and showing on screen, which we can put some things on screen right now, with these gamma brainwave states that are sometimes in advanced meditators up to hundreds of standard deviations outside of normal. And that's where these spontaneous remissions and what seem miraculous can really happen when you're completely taking your attention from something to no thing into everything, and then this beautiful thing can happen to you, through you, for you. And that's just so wild and foreign that our instrumentation can't really tell us fully what's happening when we're hundreds of standard deviations outside of normal. So can you give some context as to what that means and how powerful that really is?
So I can talk from my own personal experience, and I can talk really from the hundreds and hundreds of people that have had them as well. It feels very electric. So our language specialists, we work with the University of Central Oklahoma. We have one of the top language specialists that study the language of transformation. And so we've looked at a lot of different stories of transformation, testimonials of people who healed. And many of them have these elegant moments. And there are two really common things that people say about them. One is that it's very somatic. Like I felt it in every single cell in my body, or the top of my head blew off, or my heart turned on like an engine, or I was filled with light. This very physical, very somatic. It feels like the body's intercoursing with energy, right? The other element about it is very emotional, but not emotions that we typically feel from three-dimensional reality. That's not like you're not gonna love for your puppy or love for your mom. It's not like that. This is like you dipping closer to source, which is pure love. And there's this kind of very familiar feeling that you have, like, oh my God, I forgot I was oneness. How could I forget? But we have to forget that we're oneness in order to have this experience in separation. So it's also very emotional, and it's inevitable. In other words, you can't find the language within the neural architecture of your known personality in three-dimensional reality who's having an experience with energy and information that's unknown beyond this. You don't have the language. The only thing that people can do is use metaphors. Like they use metaphors. And so metaphors are a great way to use what's stored in your brain that's known and familiar to everybody, and turn on different metaphors so you get enough circuits going on to make it to get an understanding or a connection the person's having. The problem is the language specialist, who is one of the top researchers in the world on language, had a transformational experience and could not find the language. I watched him struggle for about a half an hour on a Zoom call. He was laughing so hard because he didn't have the language to explain the unknown, right? So many times what comes with that also is a profound change in brain chemistry. The pineal gland begins to make derivatives, metabolites of melatonin that fit in the same receptor sites as serotonin and melatonin, and those two neurotransmitters are a function of light and darkness in this three-dimensional reality. When you start interacting with energy and frequency that's faster than the speed of light, no serotonin, you're perceiving light through your eyes, and the eye is sending a signal to a nucleus in the brain, and the pineal gland is making serotonin, and light and darkness and the wavelength of visible light is bouncing off the most stable form of energy called matter. That's what causes us to be awake and asleep in this three-dimensional world. But the person now is connecting with frequencies now in their nervous system that's not coming through their senses, that's faster than the speed of light, more wholeness, more order. Melatonin can't be melatonin any longer. It gets upgraded. And melatonin is already a very powerful antioxidant. Now you're going to make very, very powerful, two of the most powerful antioxidants known to man: anti-cancer, anti-aging, anti-heart disease, anti-stroke, anti-neurodegenerative, anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial. Melatonin already causes you to relax. You're going to make a benzodiazepine-like substance that's a derivative of melatonin. Now you're going to chillax way out, and the survival centers in your brain, this is what Valium does, shuts off the amygdala. No fear, no anger, no pain. Melatonin already causes you to sleep. You're going to make a molecule that's going to cause you to hibernate. The body goes into stasis. No sex drive, no appetite, no preoccupation with the environment. First three centers of the body shut down. They shut off. And now you won't even know that you have a body, so you can wake up in another one, right? You can leave that one there and wake up somewhere else. You'd have to be in that state, right? In that state of stasis. The same chemical that's found in an electric eel. You know, when an electric eel discharges, it's discharging energy from within its nervous system. And a discharge of energy creates high amplitudes. So the high amplitudes we see in gamma, these very high amounts of energy, we suspect that it's the same neurotransmitter that's found in the electric eel. Now, melatonin already causes you to dream, but now you're going to get a derivative called dimethyltryptamine. And that chemical cranks the brain to begin to open up to information and realms beyond space and time. Now, this is really crazy because the person is having a very full-on sensory experience that's greater than any experience they had in their three-dimensional world. They're more aware in wherever they are than they've ever been aware in their life. And that full-on sensory experience is causing the brain, through experience, to reorganize its circuitry. That's what experience does. And the feeling that goes along with it is very electric because you're connecting to energy, and that energy is being translated through the nervous system in a high gamma state. And every single atom in your body is getting oscillated with information. So the person has a very profound inner experience that somehow drags their brain and body right out of the past. Now, we don't see things how they are. We see things how we are. The probability that we're seeing the truth of reality is zero. We're seeing a very small percentage of reality. All of a sudden, the person has an interaction with information that exists beyond our senses. They get an upgrade. Somehow they come back and they're in a new body. Like, oh my God, I'm in a virtual reality experience, and my character now has, I got something, I'm fixed. Somehow they didn't get the upgrade from inside the virtual reality experience. They got it from their interaction with energy and frequency. They took off the VR headset, right? So they come back and they're in a whole new life. Like, life doesn't look the same. The circuitry in their brain is causing them to broaden their spectrum of what the brain couldn't see because it wasn't wired to perceive it. Another person is seeing more things than the other 99.9999999% of reality that we're unaware of. The body having the emotion that's going along with it causes them to remember the experience longer. And what is the emotion? We've seen this. It's a greater and greater levels of love. And so you see this, if we see people that wear their HRV monitors after the event, you would suspect that as they got back into their life that, it'd probably plateau. And for days and days after, you see this climbing of energy from the experience that lingers for a period of time. Now, what's great about that? Well, when your heart's open, you're a new consciousness. Somehow your interaction with that invisible field of energy, you become it and it becomes you. I don't know how else to say that. And so then you're more conscious in three-dimensional reality.
I mean, I've experienced this. I saw people at the event that experienced this, that tap into a reality, an inner reality that is inherently ineffable. Why these Zen koans and poetic Taoist writings really seem to get deeper into the nature of things, because the experience in and of itself is beyond the capacity for linguistics. And it's, the experience where the default mode network dials down, this self-referential consciousness kind of dials down, and you tap into this field of nothingness, which is... It's useful to describe, to point people to try to experience it, because the difference in talking about it and experiencing it, I feel like, is reading a menu and having a meal.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a completely different reality. I'm just curious why, philosophically, existentially, would tapping into nothingness create more coherence?
Oh my gosh. Well, if you study many of the Asian religions, they talk extensively about nothing. That nothing was not nothing. It was rich in something, but you couldn't see it, right? So to the materialist, you kind of write that off. But for the person who's thinking, okay, if there is an invisible field of unifying energy that's organizing everything physical and material, holding everything in this room together, and you and I somehow sitting on these chairs without any effort, right? There's some invisible field of intelligence, a universal mind that's aware of everything, of everybody, of everyone, of every place, of every time. That source of everything physical and material is transcendent of everything physical and material. Okay, so take away everything physical and material. Take away your body, take away all the bodies, take away all the people, take away all the objects, all the things, all the places, take away the earth, take away the moon, the light from the moon, light from the earth, all the other planets, the moons on their planets, take away the sun, the light from the sun, the stars, the light from the stars, the galaxies. Take away everything that's material, that's known in the universe. Take it all away, and the atom's 99.9999999% nothing. That void, that vacuum is information, and information can only be traversed on frequency. So you can't experience the quantum field with your senses because it exists beyond your senses. So give people the riddle and the understanding and the map, and have them continuously think about it. Okay, so when I open my awareness to nothing, if where I place my attention is where I place my energy, and I'm paying more attention to this unified field and less attention to me as a separate individual, lay down the identity, lay down the character, get beyond your past, get beyond the predictable future, trying to anticipate, trying to expect. Settle your body down from its habits and emotions, and train it how to be relaxed in the unknown, which is normally a dangerous and scary place. Lower the volume to the emotion, take all of your attentions off all the things you're dependent on in your life to feel. The eye of the needle. In passing into the quantum field, you have to enter as pure consciousness, conscious of nothing but you as pure consciousness. And that eye of the needle, when people start practicing it, in 1 week, they get really good at it. I mean, really, really good at it. And we look at scans of people, the majority of the people that are getting their brain scan are having these elegant moments. And so you can collectively create this kind of field for people, and we're able to predict it, we're able to replicate it, and we're able to induce it. So getting people to linger in the vacuum or the void without a name, without a profession, without a boyfriend or a girlfriend, without a diet, without a face, without a parent or a child, just linger as pure consciousness is so refreshing, because think about it. Our senses plug us into three-dimensional reality. How are you going to reboot your brain? If you want to reboot your brain from three-dimensional reality, you got to take your attention off everything in three-dimensional reality. So take away your eyesight right now, take away your hearing, take away your smell, your taste, your feeling with your body. If you were still alive and you had no senses, you would be aware of nothing physical and material. You would be aware of nothing. Nothing of what? But you. You would be pure consciousness. Conscious of what? Whatever you want. So that invisible field of energy that people enter into, we call it getting beyond themselves, is that is the now. That is the present moment, the generous present moment. I've worked for years to get people to this point, and now when they cross that bridge and they enter that vacuum energy, that void, the absolute pure consciousness, pure love, all potentials, source, 0 point field, whatever you want to call it, loving intelligence, intelligent love, whatever you want to call it, in universal mind, if they understand what they're doing and why they're doing as pure consciousness there, and they can create a disturbance in the field, and it's the field that creates matter, if they can change the information in the field, could they change their experience, some experience in three-dimensional reality? And the closer they get to the source, the less separation between 2 points of consciousness, them as pure consciousness and connected to pure consciousness. The closer they are to it, the less separation between 2 points of consciousness, the less amount of time it should appear in three-dimensional reality. That's the experiment, right? So then getting to that point where you have to go against thousands and thousands and thousands of years of generations untold of programming and survival. Because when you're in survival, all your attention is on your body, your environment, and time. And to change is to be greater than your body, to be greater than your environment, and to be greater than time, which means when we're in stress and we're in survival, it's not a time to change. In fact, it's really hard to change when you're living in survival. It's time to run, fight, and hide, and trust your primitive instincts, which says that do not close your eyes and go within. You would be eaten. We work with prisoners in Latin American countries, thousands of them. You wouldn't believe how long it takes some of these people to be able to close their eyes. They will tell you, I'm sure I'd love to, but their body's saying, do not. It's coming. Don't get vulnerable, right? So then we have to lay down a lot of things we did our whole life to get what we want for something greater to occur, because the world changes in that realm called time-space. We can't execute thinking that we're a body there. We're not, So learning how to surrender into this process takes practice. It's a continuous process.
Mm. Yes, it's the willingness to die to who we have been. And man, whether we look at it from the Hermeticists say the universe is mental, or Nirvana, or the Hindus say Brahma and Atman, from all different ancient wisdom traditions, they speak to this field like you're talking to, that we're all a part of, that you can tap into deeper union with, that once you do, its nature starts to become more of your nature, and you become receptive to more coherent energy and coherent information. And the mechanics of this, when it comes to the pineal gland, I found really interesting diving into a little bit more with your work, because again, through many different depictions of the pine cone and the Eye of Horus from ancient Egypt, they refer to the pineal gland. And I'm going to try my best to share the way that you explain the effect of how it happens with the cerebral spinal fluid coming up, pressing on these rhombohedron crystals, which are six-sided, which is interesting because it's six-center, and create this piezoelectric effect.
Look at you.
Which is the mechanical pressure that's pushed on and transduced into an electrical charge. And that transduction is like an antenna to a TV that allows certain frequencies to come into certain imagery. And so when these people are having an experience, and I saw at the event, and I know I have had it, and I know you have, it's an experience, very sensory, somatic experience that is more real than anything in time, in Newtonian time, space reality. Then you start to tap into this coherent field.
Yeah. So
what did I miss there?
No, it was really great. It was really great. So the Egyptians were fascinated with the netherworld. And many times when they did their mummifications, they would keep the pineal gland. I mean, the pineal gland is a tiny little radio receiver that sits right on the top of your limbic brain, the seat of the autonomic nervous system, that automatic system. So it's packed, it's a phallus, and it's packed with these very, very dense crystals that are stacked up on top of each other, that are six-sided. And it sits right in the back of the third ventricle towards the top of the head. And it's in that third ventricle, which is like a chamber where the two hemispheres of the brain come together, and the limbic brain is wrapped around it, right? So the pineal gland kind of sits right in the dead end in the corner there. There's fluid in the body that is inside the brain and the spinal column wrapped in this very dense connective tissue called dura mater. And the fluid bathes the central nervous system. It creates buoyancy. It transmits nutrients and neuropeptides. It has a neuroprotective role to, if there's trauma, it can slush around in there. And it really enhances, because of its makeup, electrical charges. So it facilitates conductivity in the nervous system. And there's just a very natural mechanism in our biology that when we take a breath in, the sutures of the skull open up and the sacrum bone flexes back, and that fluid kind of drains down. When you exhale, the sacrum kind of flexes forward and the sutures of the skull close, and it kind of decreases the volume. And by pushing that sacrum bone forward slightly as you breathe and the volume closing, it propagates a wave that pushes the fluid up. So it's this very 2-step forward, 1-step back mechanism, 3 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back and forth by normal respiration. And it starts at the base of the spine, and that sacrum bone goes up all the way to the brain, and then there's 4 chambers. There's a 4th ventricle in the back of the neck, right at the brainstem. Then there's a long aqueduct, like a long tube, and then it enters the center called the 3rd ventricle. That's where the pineal gland's sitting. And then there's these 2 horns, these 2 lateral kind of horns that are other lateral ventricles where the fluid goes there. And then it goes whoop around this head and goes back down. So we do a particular breath by using the intrinsic muscles to blow air out and then follow your breath from your perineum and to pull that life force.
Which is
the creative force.
Perineum is the space between things.
The space down there. And the same muscles used to eliminate front and back, same muscles used for intercourse. And to coordinate the movement of the muscles, instead of releasing energy out, to practice pulling that energy up with your breath, following it into your lower abdomen, locking your belly button down, continue your breath into your gut, lock your core, and if you go 1, 2, 3 like that, bring your shoulders down, lift your chest up, straighten your spine, that fluid starts to accelerate up by increasing pressure in there.
Feel it? Dude, your voice is echoing me from the retreat.
So when you accelerate these charged molecules, and they are ions, there's proteins and salts in solution, they have a charge. And if you accelerate charged molecules quickly, it creates an external field called an inductance field. Get that fluid starting to move and accelerate, you're going to start to create a field like this. And as that field begins to move, that energy is going to be tunneled right up that tube, right up that inductance tube, and the sympathetic nervous system is going to switch on, is going to drive that energy right to the brain. You finish your breath right up at that 6th center. You keep your attention right there, and that's your target. And there's a way that you can practice kind of compressing this phallus in the right way that begins to exert a mechanical stress on those crystals. The mechanical stress on those crystals begins to create a polarization between the points on the opposite end. Like they're diamonds, right? So now you get a positive charge here and a negative charge here. And when the materials become polarized like that, it begins to produce an external electromagnetic field. And it says the field is reversible. So compress the crystals, and all of a sudden, you shimmer the crystals, you get a charge there, they start separating from each other, and now you got this bank of crystals that are emitting an external electromagnetic field. The field goes out and the crystals have physical limitations. They can't stretch anymore. And when that happens, the field reverses and it compresses the crystals again. And all of a sudden, you have this little radio receiver that can pick up frequencies that are in exact alignment with those waves. So now it said that it's a transducer. So now you have energy moving to the brain. And if all of the mind is in the body and all the emotions are stored in the body, then when the sympathetic nervous system switches on, it's taking all that energy in the form of emotions and it's releasing it back to the brain. And a gate in the brainstem opens up and energy moves right into the limbic brain, the seat of the autonomic nervous system. And the brain moves into those high gamma states. Now, when the pineal gland becomes electrically activated and it's charged, now you have a positive charge here and a negative charge down here. And what do you have? Now the body becomes a magnet. And the intensity of the activation of those crystals naturally is going to automatically draw those charged molecules to it. So now you have this prana tube moving an enormous amount of energy, and the person is The person is switched on. When that occurs, and the brain is going into this heightened state, and the nervous system, the lights are dialed down in the thinking personality, neocortex, autobiographical self. You're in theta. The anesthetization of the energy moving into the brain kind of causes you to stop analyzing and thinking, right? That anesthetization that takes place, the person now, all of a sudden, the limbic brain switches on. And now, if the nervous system is coherent and lights are out in the neocortex and it's oscillating in order like a tuning fork, the antenna that's sitting right on the top can pick up information as long as the nervous system's coherent. Can't read coherent, can't read any information if there's incoherence. There's no order. Static. Get the person coherent. And now all of a sudden, the radio receiver can start picking up information and transducing. In other words, taking the information like a TV signal on your TV antenna, and the antenna then's picking up that information and transducing it into pictures on your TV screen.
Different channels.
Into different channels. And so there's an infinite number of frequencies in the quantum, which means there's a lot of experiences for us to have in the unknown self that exist beyond our senses. So then we discovered in our functional MRIs that when the person has the default mode network shut off, which means they're not trying to predict the future, they're not trying to anticipate anything, they're completely in the present moment. When the default mode system is shut off, then when you don't expect anything to happen, that's when the unexpected happens. The correlation between the decrease in modulation, the decrease in compartmentalization, the more order in the brain, is directly correlated with the mystical experience. And the person who's having that mystical experience, their brain looks like they're on psilocybin. I'm not saying that. That's what the brain scans are saying. That's what the data is actually saying. Now, they can't make their brain do that. Somehow, it's happening to them.
I love your passion for this because I've heard so many different firsthand experiences of how potent and transformational this experience is, but you bridging the science and spirituality of this and the best we can with the tools that we have and the understanding that's continually growing and that you're really pioneering so much of the work of is helping bridge this understanding of how it's actually happening within us biologically. Now, if you're open to it, I would love for you to share the experience that you had staring into the fire that one time.
Oh my God.
I had the privilege of having you over here for with the men that one night and having the dinner, and also heard you share the story before. And it's such a, like we're obviously tapping into the exploration of the mystical in ways that we can't fully describe, but the experiences are so real, like we're speaking to, and that you've shared. And so would you be open to sharing a little bit of that story?
Yeah. So I was just thinking while you were talking, because when we look at the brain scans of people in those high gamma states, the area right around the pineal gland is on fire. Like there's an enormous amount of energy. So we know that the radio receiver is dialed in, that it's switched on. And so I think as a child, I had a lot of weird experiences just for me that weren't really seemed very common that other people were having. My brother and I both. But I was always fascinated by, the idea of mystics and what that really meant all along, throughout my whole entire life. And I started thinking about it had to be a change in brain chemistry. And I, looked at all kinds of exogenous substances and just was curious because I was in the healthcare field and people would ask me all the time about different substances. And so I just thought it'd be a good idea for me to look into it. But I wasn't interested in looking into the data that wasn't scientific. So I found these really nerdy scientists that really spent their whole life studying the pineal gland and vertebrates. And it's such a fascinating journey because so many vertebrates have this little gland in the back of their brain that's sensitive to frequency. It's almost like an extra sensory organ. So for an example, the chameleon has a very soft spot right where the pineal gland sits right underneath. And the light that's coming from the sun, the spectrum of visible light and infrared light somehow reaches its receptors in the pineal gland, its little crystals, and the information it's getting about the environment causes that gland to secrete melanins or pigments that cause them to blend in with the environment. They're not doing that through their senses. I'm sure there's an element to it, but it's an instantaneous process that now they're part of the environment for preservation. Homing pigeons have these magnetic crystals also that allow them to navigate true north. Bees have them, turtles have them, most vertebrates have them. So anyway, long story short, I started reading these geeky guys to find out what exactly was that I could find that wasn't just, I wasn't interested in a hippie book. I was interested in the science stuff. Not to say that there isn't science in hippie books, but I wanted to go right to the published papers. And so I came across this paper that was talking about those derivatives that I just talked about. And I found it so fascinating. And I started thinking about how could the brain make those derivatives? Like, what would be the signaling mechanism to get the brain to make them? Would it be a vision quest, fasting? I went through all the thoughts in my head. And so anyway, I wrote a paper on it. And the paper wound up being published. It was the day that the paper was published. And I felt really great about it. And it was called Sarah, Mel, and the Whole Family of Pineal Neurotransmitters. And so I put my kids to sleep. I was cleaning up the kitchen, and I went and sat on the couch, and there was a fire going. I was living in the Pacific Northwest at the time, and I was tired. It was the end of the day, but I wasn't ready to go to sleep. And my kids were kind of goofing around in the bedroom, and I was teasing them, saying, I'm going to come in there, and so they settled down and got really quiet. I knew they fell asleep. And I started thinking about all the things that I had to do. I got to get this done. I got to get that done. Tomorrow I got to do this. The horse is about ready to give birth, all this stuff. And the fire was going, and I must have just been in the right state where I was gazing into the fire, and I kind of moved into trance. And I think one of the best ways to induce trance is when you're looking at something that isn't predictable, like there's novelty involved, whether it's the waves rolling in, flickers of flame, or an aquarium where, creatures are moving about. Somehow we kind of pause for a minute and we go into that kind of alpha state. So I was tired. My brain chemistry probably was changed. I wasn't ready to go to sleep, but my body was tired and I was awake. And I was just thinking about those derivatives and those metabolites. And I started fishing around with my awareness. And I said to myself, to my pineal gland, where are you anyway? That's just what I said. Where are you? I kind of fished around in there. And the moment I made my attention connected to it, it was like a three-dimensional screen opened up, and I saw this gland, and its mouth was in spasm. And I saw this white milky substance coming out of the gland, and I just was like, wow. And then it switched, and there was a timepiece that was probably 15 feet tall I was standing in front of. I remember the crystalline colors on the glass. I've never seen colors. I don't know how to describe it. It's not in the color range that we know, but it was colors. And I could see the Roman numerals on every one of that numbers on the timepiece. And it was brilliant. It was light. And all of a sudden, I see the hands of the clock quickly start rolling backwards in time. And the moment I see that hands of the clock going backwards in time, I'm thinking, while it's happening, I have the realization, oh my God, the pineal gland is a biological timepiece that allows us to travel forwards and backwards in time. I just had the thought, like, oh, that's what it is. And as it's winding backwards, I realize I'm moving through time. But I'm not going anywhere. I'm present, but I'm moving through time. And as I move through time, I'm experiencing spaces or dimensions. And they're all stacked up on top of each other. And I run through my whole life till I'm about a 9-year-old kid. And I land in my bedroom. Now I'm Joe Dispenza at that time. In my bedroom, as conscious as I am right now, probably more, looking at myself laying in the bed. And when I was a kid, I really liked having fevers because I would go super lucid. And so I was having a fever, and my mother had just left the room. She closed the door, and she said to my father, "He's burning up." And then she would always give me like aspirin or baby aspirin or whatever. And I would always fake like I would take it, and I put it in my flannel pockets and my pajamas, and I never took it because I didn't want to miss the trip. Like I did not want to miss the flight. So anyway, so here I am watching myself. I have the covers right up to my nose. It's dark in my room, but I can see myself. My mother closes the door, and I'm looking at myself as a 9-year-old kid, and at the same time, I'm re-experiencing that moment. I'm 9 years old again, and I'm deeply involved in trying to figure out how time works, and I'm seeing it as this three-dimensional chessboard, but they're not cubes. They're kind of more like honeycombs, and I'm watching when we change how that affects reality, and it's just all mathematical. And I'm 9 years old, and I'm doing this, and I'm standing over myself, and I fall in love with this kid. I just start laughing. I'm like, oh my God, he's going to become you. Like, he's definitely going to become you. Because I'm still doing that right now, and so I look at him and I shake my head. And the moment I fall in love with him, I know that he's going to become me. I know that. And I know that the love that I'm having for him in that moment is actually what's drawing him towards me as my future self. Not as my Joe Dispenza then. I just realized there's a bigger thing involved, that I just had a moment of outside of time. I was outside of time. Not this kind of time. I was outside of time. In fact, I was in two places simultaneously conscious, So anyway, I fall in love with this guy, and then I realize I'm going to become him, and I know that somehow my future self is drawing him to me in love. And then all of a sudden I look up, and there's the clock again, and all of a sudden I start seeing it moving forward in time. And I'm just like, oh no, we're going forward in time. And all of a sudden I land on my ranch in the Northwest, and I'm walking with this long cape in the back pastures. I'm coming through the back pastures where the mares are, and I cross through the gate, and I come through the gardens, and I'm barefoot. And it's a November evening, and there's a blanket of prisms of frost along the carpet of the grass, and I can see it go on as the moon hits it. And I'm walking barefoot, and the ground is ice cold, and it feels amazing. Like it felt like I was part of the whole. Like the cold was pleasurable to me. I didn't have an aversion to it. I was part of nature, was part of me. I was connected. I don't know how to describe it. There was a reverence with my feet on the earth. It was just a whole different experience that I've ever had. And I love nature. And so I walk through the gardens, and I walk across these basalt stones that I had built into a fireplace. And as I crossed the stones, the moment I touched the stones, I don't know how to say this, except I knew they knew me, and I knew them, and they were noble, and I was noble, and we had this very strong moment, this connection. They were conscious, let me just say that, and I was conscious that they were conscious, and they were so happy to be where they were to serve me. I don't know how to say this in words. Anyway, I'm feeling pretty exalted, and I walk over to this fountain where there's a beautiful seating area, and I had all this wisteria growing. And I built this fountain with my brother, and I stopped. I had the cape I was wrapped around, and I stopped, and I looked at the fountain, and I just started laughing. Like, I remember when we built this thing. And then all of a sudden, behind the fountain comes this little woman, and again, she was colors of light I had never seen in my life, and she was radiant and glowing, and she was like about this big, really small, and there was a steward that was kind of behind her that followed her. I don't know, maybe a mentor, but someone that was kind of protecting her. And she just kind of walked out from behind the fountain, and she just looked at me. Now, I was feeling pretty good. I thought I was enlightened. I thought I was there. And she looked at me, and in an instant, she hit me in the heart with a level of love that was probably 1,000 times greater than what I was feeling in that moment. And then when it hit me in the heart, the thought on that she was transmitting to me is there is always more love. And I was just like, oh my God, how foolish, how arrogant of me, how small-minded of me. Like, and I was feeling pretty good. Like, you would be like, wow, this is great. And she was telling me there was more love. And it hit me so strong in the heart that it kind of awakened me. And then I kind of glanced over. And as I glanced over, as my future self, I'm looking at my current self washing dishes in the kitchen moments before I laid on the couch. And I just kind of crossed my arms and I take a moment, I look at this guy, and there he is again, like same guy, like he's washing dishes and he's trying to dovetail all these concepts. He's got all these thoughts on his mind. He's trying to figure it all out. You know, I see his strengths, I see his weaknesses, I see his sincerity. You know, he's me. Like, and I just look at this guy and I fall in love with him. Now my heart is really expanded in that moment. And so I have a very strong feeling of love for him. And I forgot this, but when I was washing the dishes, all of a sudden I felt this crazy feeling while I was washing the dishes. Like, I felt like, what the hell? And I thought, is somebody looking at me outside? You know, and I kind of trying to lean and look out the window, but the light from the kitchen was creating like a reflection, so I could only see myself. And then I thought, well, there's dogs on the property. It's a ranch. There was somebody out there, they'd be going off, you know? So I just kind of looked like that, and I just kind of went back to washing dishes, you know? Anyway, so then I came to, and I think the most powerful part of this whole entire thing was that feeling that I had in my chest. Like, that feeling lingered for about 2 weeks. Like, and then I started thinking, like, what is reality? Was that real? How could I feel such a strong emotion from something that I don't know, that I didn't experience in three-dimensional reality? And then, so that furthered my investigation, both in the research department of the pineal gland, but then also a lot of the mystical understandings that so many cultures had around this, you know, pine cone shaped gland that somehow has all kinds of wonderful effects on the human biology. And it's called the third eye. I don't know, I call it the first eye.
Yeah, the third iPhone.
Yeah,
Call
exactly.
you up. Man, the transmission, like that, there is this loving intelligence that is guiding us, that may be our future selves, that is ineffable, but like the experience that you had of your future self, the love that you had for him, drawing you to him, to who you are and who you're evolving into is really profound. I mean, I feel it, like these intuitive hits that we have that pull us in a direction, that are like whispers that we start to listen to more of, and that brings us more connection, abundance, freedom, purpose, dharma is really an interesting reflection.
I think the biggest takeaway for me, without a doubt, is I realized that love, it wasn't coming from anyone or anything out there. So you stop looking for it out there. It's like it came from my own inward journey, you know? And I think that's when our values change a lot. You know, I mean, that's when, you know, I think, well, you know, we look at people that come to our work, whether they're coming for health or wealth or relationships or mystical, whatever it is, new careers, they're really coming for wholeness. That's what they're really coming for. So the pineal gland meditation in and of itself, you have to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, so you can do the meditation with the intention of staying present and assigning meaning to every single step. And it's the act of understanding the what and the why that switches on the prefrontal cortex for an intended outcome. And so, yeah, we've been investigating it. There are areas of the brain when the person has one of these transcendental moments, very specific areas of the brain that reflect the person's having a moment where they're creating a long-term memory, and the emotion that's associated with it is love and joy. So we know that in no way are they in any type of trouble, because a neuroscientist sometimes that sees these kind of scans thinks seizure, like almost all the time. And the person's having a connection, really, a pretty big moment.
Yeah, I guess last note on that, on just that story is, first off, I love that kid. I love that kid who has this obsession that's reflecting on the nature of time at such a young age and has drawn you to where you're at now, and how that passion is still alive, thriving, bigger than ever before. You know, we were joking at the men's group dinner that we started calling you Dr. Strange because this real deep passion you have for the understanding of the nature of reality and to bridge that gap between science and spirituality is so just admire it and love that passion in you.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm just curious, as you've gone on this journey of trying to make sense of all this, so what's happened to you and your innate curiosities, there's still obviously the gap from what science can explain or have measured versus the inner intrinsic spiritual experiences that we can go on describing. And I'm just curious, how do you courageously try to bridge that gap and share experiences which you know are going to be ridiculed if they haven't been fully, fleshed out in the scientific world?
Yeah, it's really easy. I don't care. Like I really don't care. Like I'm at the point, Andre, where, and I'm not saying this in the least bit in any arrogant way, but I know that on some level we're helping people. And if I listen to the ridicule and the attacks that I had on me to discourage me in doing this, then I probably wouldn't deserve to be doing it. I mean, the cool thing about the science and the investigation is you can't call it pseudoscience anymore. That's the first thing. The second thing is this is not for everybody. Like, I love medicine. I love the advancements in medicine. I love pharmacology and how they've helped so many people, including myself, So I'm not saying that drop your dependence on your antidepressant tomorrow. I'm saying that there's an innate capacity for the body to heal when it's under the right conditions. To the degree in which that the body heals, I'm blown away. Like, I'm blown away. So it's not me that's saying these things. It's the science that's saying it. It's the research that's saying it. So we can't call it pseudoscience any longer. We're able to reproduce the outcomes, which means it's really, really scientific. And the idea that people can understand that they have a hand in their own whatever health or their own life is such a huge responsibility and such a huge freedom. And so I'm not at all concerned about it, because the conversations that I am having with doctors and researchers and clinicians are very different than the conversations I was having just 2 years ago, because the scientist in the person who sees someone with stage 4 cancer go into remission is going to say bullshit. It happens all the time. But the human in them many times just goes, if that happened, how did that happen? That's what got me on the journey. How did that person step out of a wheelchair? I watched her step out of a wheelchair in real time. Like, what happened in there, right? So it piques a greater conversation. I don't want to argue with anybody. I'm not saying that people should not do the conventional things. I'm saying the nervous system in the human body has the capacity to manufacture a pharmacy of chemicals that works equal to or better than any drug. That's what our data shows. So if you know that's the case, then it would really be prudent to understand, if I'm out of homeostasis, tell me the things I need to do to get back into homeostasis so I have energy for growth and repair, so I have energy for long-term building projects. And so I was sitting at a table with 15 of our scientists 2 months ago, looking at the data, and we had a couple new people there, but these are very, very well-published scientists from Harvard, from Stanford, from UCSD, from everywhere. And we're just picking apart the research. And the new neuroscientist was kind of sitting there, and one of the leading experts in the microbiome is at UC San Diego. She's a brilliant scientist and really smart, brilliant person. And she was showing everybody all the probiotic effects of the microbiome and the dramatic changes that were taking place in 7 days. There's no diet. There's no probiotic that you'll take, take away the sugar, take away the alcohol, fast, intermittent, whatever it is. You don't see these kind of changes in 7 days ever. And she was putting up the graphs and we were looking at them, and there they are, all the growth for anti-cancer, anti-inflammation, all these really, really healthy microbes. And the neuroscientist just kind of pauses and goes, excuse me, like, what? Like, are you kidding? Like, it never occurred to her. But she looked at the evidence, and how could you deny it? You cannot deny it because that's what the data shows, right? So if it was happening in 10% of our community, and it was the right temporal lobe, a standard or 2 standard deviations are greater than normal in the peak moment of gamma for sustained 2 minutes, I probably wouldn't be as passionate. But when you see the 77% of the population, 84% of the population, more than one study, 100% of the population, the tribe, the flock, the herd, the school, the collective, there's an emergent consciousness that's being reflected in people's biology in 7 days. So the scientist who has an interest in this area, and by the way, our scientists were very skeptical when they started. They call it medicine. They do the work. They say it's the best medicine. I'm going to keep doing it. They're not doing it to be spiritual. They're doing it because they understand the practical value behind it, right? So you look at the data and you see it happen in 7 days. So many scientists they fall out of their chair and they go, 7 days? Like all these dramatic changes, 77% of the population, every one of those people with different genotypes, genes make proteins, 77% of the herd, of the flock, are expressing the same genes and making the same proteins. That's more than 3 out of 4 people. There's an emergent consciousness, and their biology genetically is evolving together in 7 days. So the scientists who have the understanding, they see this, they're blown away by it, and now we have really great invitations to delve deeper. But do I say that I have the only answer? No. I'm saying, wow, we came across something really, we don't bias any of our studies. We draw blood, we do brain scans, we randomly collect things. We measure everything. I mean, you saw the data on
the quantum study is very, very fascinating.
The breast milk study is insane.
Teardrops, breast milk, poop, sweat, biometrics,
urine,
everything. Seeing what's really happening, yeah.
So it's kind of cool. So
just a little bit.
so the conversations I'm having with scientists are very different than they were years ago, and I love when I see some of the scientists running the same study 3 or 4 times in a row. They're really, really thinking they're going to get a different outcome. They're getting a new outcome than they typically would expect. If they're running it 4 times, I know they're changing their belief in that moment. I know that they're discovering something new.
Yeah, a really fascinating share that you guys did with some of the scientists was meditators through intention alone, upregulating SERPINA5. That was very, very interesting.
It is an amazing study because, I mean, when you get the brain and the body in the right state, and you can open the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, and you can get a person relaxed and awake, right between worlds, conscious and their subconscious mind. If they have the intent to signal a gene to make a protein, that intention is translated as chemistry in the form of chemical information. That's what the intention is. It's the reflection of information chemically. 100% of the people, 100% of them that had the intention of regulating SERPINA5 protein, 100% of them did it. The trend to regulate endogenous interferon was up over 90%. The trend was in the exact same direction. Begs the question, if genes make proteins, what protein could you not make? Collagen, elastin, actin, myosin, enzymes, hormones. we're just scratching our head going, wow, it's really obvious. So if we bake the study and we give another group of people serpin A5, and our community knows about serpin A5 because it's in higher concentrations in advanced meditators, and that's the protein that stops the COVID virus from entering the cell, right? The COVID cannot enter because this protein inhibits the receptor that cuts the spikes off. So it's elevated. So if you're in the second group and you get serpin A5, you think, oh my God, I got the real protein, because everybody thought they got the real protein because many of them knew about serpin A5. But if you give them 4 fake ones, 4 ones that don't exist, and you bake them completely, there's no protein, there's no gene, and you have them intentionally signal those genes, none of the serpin A5 they have a 0 effect on the serpin A5. Why? Because they're putting in a whole order. They're not just putting in serpin A5, they're putting in serpin A5 plus the second one, plus the third one, plus the fourth one, plus the fifth one. And if the order is corrupt, it's not going to make any of them. That's how intelligent our autonomic nervous system is. So without knowing the molecular structure of serpin A5, without knowing the molecular structure or the gene expression of endogenous interferon, the intention somehow reaches the autonomic nervous system, and it manufactures a pharmacy of chemicals equal to that intention. The possibilities are endless if you can get a person into the right state.
Another very interesting study that points to just how powerful our thoughts and intentions and beliefs are was the robot and chick study. Very, very fascinating, and just another example of how in the study they showed the power of the ability to change the direction of the robot that was controlled by a random number generator, right? Mm-hmm. I would love for you to share a little bit about that.
Okay, I'll share it in 2 levels. Okay, so there was a study done by this French researcher, René Piache, and what he did was he built an arena, and he built a random event generator. And the random event generator is programmed to randomly turn left or right, like a 0 or 1. It's going to turn right or left, but it's not going to be right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. It's going to randomly do it. And the more you go right, left, right, left, right, left, or heads, tails, the more you get 50%. So he sets the random event generator inside the arena, and as you would expect, it's going to cover pretty much the whole entire space. He then hatches these baby chicks, and baby chicks imprint, right? That's what they do. So they imprint on this robot thinking it's their mother. And so then he takes the baby chicks and he puts them in a cage outside of the arena, and he turns on the random event generator, and the baby chicks' intention and the love and emotion that they felt for their mother caused the random event generator to turn 100% of the time in the direction of the baby chicks. Now, these baby chicks with a very, very tiny, teeny-weeny little brain and teeny-weeny little heart somehow had some type of influence on a programmed machine to behave more orderly and less randomly. Okay, so in our work, we say, just for the sake of simplicity, everything's vibrating. Your thoughts are electric, and your feelings, your heart feelings, are magnetic. So if you can get the brain coherent, you can send a very clear signal as an electrical charge into the field. If you get that heart turned on and feel the emotion before it happens, the heart is a magnetic field. And it's measured. You can measure it. The more coherent the heart, the more you have a strong magnetic field. And that's what draws experiences to us. So in our work, we marry a clear intention and an elevated emotion, a coherent brain and a coherent heart, and create a Wi-Fi signal. And if there's a vibrational match between some possibility in the quantum field, a frequency or information, and your energy, and you're creating beyond space and time from the field instead of from matter, and it's the field that creates matter, is it possible when there's a vibrational match to draw that experience to you without having to do anything, right? So we use that as a teaching tool so that people can see then, oh my God, if a baby chick can do it, I certainly can do it. So that's one point. And people do it all the time. The other thing is we use random event generators during our coherence healings. And they're sophisticated coin tosses. And the machines that we have pretty much toss a coin about 1,000 times in a second. So it's a lot of tosses for the whole event. And when nobody's in the room, there's a little parabola like this. When there's nobody in the room, you see it go heads, tails, but it's pretty much 50-50, okay? When we do our in-person coherence healings, where we're going to change the information in the field of the person who's laying there with some type of health condition.
2,000 people in this case in different pods of about 6 to 8 people focusing intention and energy on one individual.
Yeah, with a coherent brain and a coherent heart, change the information in their field could change the destiny of matter. Get a collective network of observers together with brain and heart coherence, single-minded, with one intention to give life to another's life, to love another person into life. Get them together, get the tribe together to bring life back into some of the members' life. Something happens where you can't not open your heart. So when we do those coherence healings, the graphs are insane. Here we go like this. All of a sudden, the group gets together, and all of a sudden, one, just keeps going way outside of that parabola. Somehow, a collective network of observers with brain and heart coherence is causing a machine that's programmed to go zeros and ones all of a sudden to behave more orderly. And that happens just about 100% of the time when we do those coherence healings. So then we did further studies where we put several of them in the room, and we took one and we insulated it in a Faraday cage, which is basically nickel and copper, mostly copper, but nickel too. And those are heavy metals that insulate electromagnetic frequencies. You go to the radiologist and they're going to x-ray your spine. They may put a copper little something over your ovaries just to diminish the absorption of radiation. So when we wrapped it in copper and nickel, all the other machines behaved very orderly except the one that was wrapped. So we know now on some level that the metal somehow insulated some type of electromagnetic energy, heart being the magnetic field, brain being the electrical signal in the field. So we look at the last point, we were just looking at this data with with a Harvard cardiologist. And there was just one fascinating measurement where we had all these people wearing HRV measurements. And beginning of the coherence healing, everybody's heart coherent, and then you see this dramatic drop in every one of the coherence healings where the heart becomes incoherent. And he said, can somebody tell me why it only happens during the coherence healings and never in any other meditations? They just kept getting more coherent. It's because that moment there's an arousal. And that's the moment the entire collective is now on the sympathetic nervous system switched on, and it's moving enormous amounts of energy, a lot of energy to the brain. What happens afterwards is truly insane. Because as I said earlier, just like when people create, after that coherence healing, their heart energy and coherence goes up weeks later. In other words, they're not trying to feel love. They feel love. And then the next question is, why would you stop doing it? It's so much better than a football game. It's so much better than a shopping spree. And you're helping people to heal and change. And we've got unbelievable stories of people with stage 4 cancers and blindness and deafness and all kinds of spinal cord injuries, muscular dystrophy, all kinds of ALS, all kinds of crazy conditions where people are, somehow renewed by the collective.
Those group coherence healings are so fascinating to me and were beautiful to be a part of. And I really felt the love that we give is the love that we receive. And because that's who we are in our true essence, at least I feel. And it's, people had powerful experiences. And I know this was your 50th week-long retreat. And I got to meet a lot of people who have been going many times. The vast majority were first-timers that went
75%.
75%. met a lot of incredible individuals. Stephanie, who's got stage 4 lung cancer, listens to this podcast. Met so many people who are communities of Know Thyself as well, and people that have been studying your work for a long time and have had immense transformations, and have had relatives that have had immense transformations. And it's just really beautiful to see the sincerity of the individuals on the path and their devotion to healing. And man, I just can only imagine there's so many different factors of what goes into the energetics of somebody going through one of these healings. One, giving themselves the permission to receive, which maybe they never have had that much focused attention in their whole life of people genuinely just giving them love and a focus, and then their capacity to receive that, and then the actual energetics of it is just so powerful. And I'm excited to see the studies that continue to be done by you guys.
Yeah, we have groups of people that do remote coherence healings. I mean, where the person is not even in the room, there's 60 people focusing on a picture of a person. And we did a study with PTSD, a triple-blind placebo study, if you can imagine that, where we used fake pictures, and the group didn't know who they were healing or what group, which was the Healy that was real or wasn't. Anyway, at the end of the study, a 6-week intervention, 9 out of 10 people that were diagnosed with PTSD no longer had PTSD. That works better than any pharmaceutical, any treatment. So we're working with autistic kids now, and wow, the changes that are taking place with these kids, we're super excited. So yeah, we'll continue. We're doing a study on cancer right now.
Another aspect of the retreat that I found really beautiful were the walking meditations. What has seeing men specifically getting into their heart done for you?
Yeah, it's really, really cool to see. I mean, well, I was raised in a very ethnic, very emotionally, connected family. I mean, my uncles and the men in my family were very affectionate with each other. So I think, the program for men is to succeed and to compete and to accomplish and be the best or the first or the most or whatever that is. It's part of our biology. And you can get really good at using that third center to get there. But I think when men really open their hearts, it's really beautiful to see, because there's this kind of childlike quality in this kind of freshness that happens. And I do my best in my life, in the companies that I own, to lead with my heart, because I think that's the best, actually, in my life. I think it's the best way for us to be the example. So it takes a lot for men to figure that out, because it goes so against the program, many of them. And yet I've seen so many men heal when they do. And the walking meditations are a great way to practice doing it with your eyes open. I mean, you got to start with your eyes closed so you're not distracted by your environment or the drives of your body or your schedule or whatever. But you got to get so good at doing it with your eyes closed, you got to be able to do it with your eyes open. That's the game. This is the plane of demonstration. If you're going to heal yourself, demonstrate it. If you're going to heal another person, you got to demonstrate it. If you want to heal someone else at a remote location, you got to demonstrate it, right? You got to have the experience. So men who do open their hearts, and boy, I mean, we have some men who, they didn't even want to come to the event. Their wives dragged them there. And, we're looking at their HRV measurements, and not only are they in heart coherence, but the amplitude of energy in their heart is 3 times higher, 200% higher than most people. That's not a lot. That's not a little love. That's a lot of love for a person to feel. So we believe the heart is the creative center. It's the union of opposites, of polarity, of duality. It's where wholeness begins, I think. It's where our divinity starts. It's a great place for us to practice feeling those emotions. And it goes against, in many cases, the animal self. And if you're living in survival and living in stress, it's just not a time to open your heart, because that would mean you're vulnerable. So teaching men how to do it and practicing doing that, I think, has benefits in so many wonderful ways.
I think also, going back home, the important key is the continuation of the practice, right? Because if you haven't enlightening experience, and then go back into an environment that informs your old personality, which then leads to that reality that is your old self. Yeah.
Seamless. It could happen seamless.
Yeah.
I want it to be an experiment, Andre. I never use the words discipline. This is a discipline. I want it to be an experiment for people. Like if a victim is someone who's allowing their outer environment, some person, some circumstance, some condition, to literally affect and control the way they're feeling and the way they're thinking. And you say, why are you upset today? Well, I am upset because of this person. What you're saying is that person is actually influencing and controlling my feelings and my thoughts, which makes us victim to the environment. It's nothing, no judgment there. It's just it's what we call it. The desire that I have is to see if you can change the way you think and feel with a coherent brain and coherent heart, and see if you can produce those synchronicities so you believe more that you're the creator of your life and less of the victim of your life. So the experiment is, am I the creator of my life? And do I believe that? Now, if you believe that, then it means you have to get up and create. Because if you're not being defined by a vision of the future, you're going to be left with the memories of the past, and you're going to be predictable in your life, super predictable in your life. So then it takes time and practice in a constant revision of the model and understanding what you're doing. It's so much easier to forget this information than to remember it. So the experiment is, okay, let me do this for 2 weeks, and let's see if I'm a creator. Let's see if I start having these synchronicities, these unknowns. And I'm not talking about a parking space. People will tell you, oh yeah, I'm good at creating parking spaces, and oh, my roommate from college was going to, I just thought of him and he literally called me. Okay, well, you accept that, but you can't accept that you could create something even greater, right? So the creative process then is an investment in your future. And if you're not waking up in the morning and being a creator, then more than likely you're going to be a victim to your life, right? So how do you believe in that future more than you believe in your past? You got to open that heart of yours, and that emotion that you feel has you feel connected to that future, right? You can't believe in that future if you're feeling the emotion of the past. You'll believe in your past more, right? So people who do the work and heal, some of them, that do their meditations 3 times a day. They tell me backstage. And I say, why? And they're just like, well, because I started disbelieving again. I started doubting that I could do it. And I just had to sit down and do it again. And they would get up and believe in that future. And a belief is just a thought you keep thinking over and over again until it's wired in your brain. Marry that belief with a very intensely strong emotion. The stronger the emotion you feel, the more you'll remember that belief. And you're giving your body a taste of the future emotionally. So they had to get up, believing in their future more than they believed in their past. And some people get up from their meditations and they believe in their past more than their future, and they didn't overcome themselves. That's all that means. The second thing that I found so fascinating is that when I interview people who truly do change, and the chemo and the radiation and the surgeries and the drug trials and the diets and the gluten-free and the vegan and the organic and the whatever didn't work. I mean, nothing changes in our life until we change. They were doing their meditations not to heal. They were doing their meditations to change. They figured, if I change, then I'll heal. Now, that's a totally different game, because now you're out of the bleachers and you're on the playing field, and you gotta watch your responses with your eyes open to everyone and everything. 1 hour of meditation against 16 hours in your waking day where you feel coherent and great, and the rest of the time you're insecure and you're competitive and you're frustrated and you're nervous and you're anxious. No diet, no exercise program, no supplements, no magic thing is going to keep you back in homeostasis if you're emotionally out of balance, all the time. So people get really prudent in this work because they realize I got to keep changing if I'm going to keep healing. And so that's when it becomes more engaging for a person to believe in themselves. And I think when you believe in yourself, you're believing in a new possibility. And when you believe in a new possibility, you got to believe in yourself. So getting up every day and getting beyond I'm too tired, I don't feel like it, I'll do it later, I'm not very good at this, I don't know what I'm doing, you know, all that stuff that people talk themselves out. And then their disbelief in themselves becomes a habit. And that's all we work on in a 7-day event. You just keep showing up for you, keep showing up for you, keep showing up for you, keep doing, getting beyond the last one, going into the next one, keep going, keep going, keep going. Sooner or later, you're going to feel really worthy of whatever future you're creating. You put your time in. You're not in an entitled way, not in like an arrogant, you know, self-important way, like not like that. Just like you feel like, hey, I know it's going to happen. So, and I think the universe only gives us what we think we're worthy of receiving. And so showing up for yourself becomes the new habit instead of giving up on yourself.
You're describing what is the pinnacle or like the pivotal aspect of this work is in the moment where we face challenges, where it's easy to regress back into our old unconscious reactive self, to step into a conscious creator and choose the direction of who we're becoming. We start to perceive our challenges differently, right? Like when something challenging that would push us back into how we used to act comes in, I feel like the switch in what you're describing here is you see it as an opportunity to make a declaration of who you're becoming. And so I would love for you to share anything on that, but also in your own personal life when challenges arise, as having your hand in so many things, incredibly, like it's guaranteed that at any given moment something's going wrong, right? You really have to have deeper mastery over this when there's so many opportunities to slip into unconsciousness.
Yeah. I think we're all faced with great opportunities brilliantly disguised as impossible situations. I believe that.
I love that.
And I think, you know, I have a friend who's a researcher at UC Santa Barbara. My youngest son loves him. He says he's a cross between Einstein and Jerry Garcia. Like, he's just super cool guy. And they found this window in the radial area here where you can measure resilience and responses that help the body or weaken the body. And the differentiating factor that I found so unique, and I go to breakfast with him typically once a month on the beach. The differentiating factor is the person who sees what's in front of them as a challenge will strengthen their response. The person who sees it as a problem, actually, the response to the environment is weakening the organism, right? So the problems that we face in our life are there, and we've created from a certain level of consciousness or unconsciousness. And by not consciously changing them over time, we agree with them until they become a problem, right? So we can't resolve that problem from the same level of consciousness. We have to go to a greater level of consciousness. Now that means then, if you keep thinking the same way about that problem and you keep feeling the same way about that problem, and how you think and how you feel creates an energetic field, your energy is actually the same, and nothing changes in your life until you change your energy. And when you change your energy, you change your life. Okay, so if I'm going to go at this problem from the same level of mind and same emotional response, it's not going to change. And if my emotion is causing me to put more of my attention on the problem, it's entirely possible that I'm the one that's keeping the problem the same. Now, that's not a fun thing to admit. So do I react in my life? Absolutely. But the question is, how long are you going to react? That's the real question, right? I mean, if you keep it going on for a long period of time, you'll go unconscious, right? So I think it's valuable to learn how to self-regulate so we don't return back to the same collective consciousness that everybody else is feeling and thinking. I think it's really great to change your emotional state and learning how to shorten the refractory period of your emotional reactions. I think self-regulation is a great way to do that. And I also think that taking time and asking for answers or tuning into a possibility that you haven't thought of is super powerful as well. And to place your attention in a reality where the problem doesn't exist. And we call that changing boxes. So I use that particular meditation all the time because there's got to be a possibility in the quantum field where the problem doesn't exist, right? So I work on regulating my emotional states. Sometimes I find it really valuable to gain information. Like somebody somewhere at some point had to face a similar thing. What did they do to get through it, right? So information is a great way to build models of understanding, give you some direction. The person who's really sincere about reading that information will begin to rehearse mentally what they're going to do. All right, I got the information. Okay, in this situation, I'm going to try this. And you kind of review it in your mind. That's installing the hardware, right?
Like if my coworker is going to say something triggering, rehearsing how you want to show up.
Yeah, what would love do?
Yeah.
Like, what would love do today? How could I be with her and see that she's just in pain? Like, how can I just not react like how she expects everybody to react? I'm going to react differently. I'm going to love her in that moment. And you're going to have to practice that a few times in your mind, right? So the act of closing your eyes and mentally rehearsing what you're doing, if you're truly present, the brain doesn't know the difference between the real life experience and what you're imagining. The brain's going to look like you've already did it. So now you're priming the brain. You're installing the hardware for you to use when you get with your coworker. And then your response then in behaving equal to your intention produces a new experience. And the new experience should produce a new emotion. Instead of you feeling resentful and judgmental, the end product is you feel more love for her. And you're like, oh my God, I totally understand her. And something changes as a result of it. So I don't know if there's ever an end to that. So the rehearsal process is taking the philosophical, the theoretical knowledge and information and think about how you're going to apply it, how you're going to personalize it, how you're going to use it, how you're going to initiate that knowledge so that you can have an experience. And the experience then produces the emotion. And now when we feel the emotion, we're teaching our body chemically to understand what our mind has intellectually understood. In other words, the information is not just in the mind. Now the information is in the body, right?
That realization, like you said, can be very uncomfortable when you're so identified in the somethingness of a personality. You live in relation to other beings with your distorted perception of them. You don't actually get to connect with them, which is a painful realization because you're not actually in intimacy with life and you're in you have a distorted mental perversion of everything and everyone around you. And I just find that reflection you gave of viewing these as opportunities and mentally rehearsing is really empowering way for you to step into interacting and being intimate with life and other individuals in general. And the more I feel like as you're speaking to this, like it makes me feel like the more that you tap into that nothingness, the experience of nothingness, the more that when you're faced with challenging somethingnesses, the less you are averse or cling or need to control as much.
Yeah. I think that's because in order for you to get to that nothingness, you got to get beyond your emotional body, right? So if you keep lowering the volume to some emotion, you keep working with, I don't know, I'll make one up, impatience, and you're just, and your body's getting revved up and you're doing that for a little while. Finally, when you settle your body down and it goes, the hardest part of every war is the last battle. So it throws everything at you and you're like, sorry, I'm going to just sit here until you're done. When you kind of finally free yourself from that place, it makes total sense that it's not in you anymore. So you walk out into your world and your response is like, you see a part of yourself you used to be in another person that you no longer are, and you have nothing but compassion for them because you see, oh my God, that person's suffering. Oh my God, that person's just afraid. I know that because I used to be that, right? But it's not like, oh, I resist or judge that person. It's more like, oh, I get it. Like, I get it. So what's the value behind that? I think mirror neurons. Everybody wants to behave in a better way. They just don't know how. Some people, know what they want to change and why they want to change. They just don't know how to change, right? So we've spent many, many years since 2011, doing the research to understand the neuroscience and the biology of change. And I think on some level, um, the science that we've created has become the language to be inclusive for everybody.
One aspect that is making this more accessible to people is the new documentary, which people can find out more about at sourcethefilm.org. I saw it, beautiful. Congratulations. It's really awesome to see the science that you guys have been working on for years starting to come out to the light in a really accessible format. So super well done, sharing some of the stories as well of people and their periods of transformation. So people just can check that out. Shameless plug right there. And just a couple last little things as we start to head towards wrapping up. I think as you have been such a pioneer and leader in these in-person immersive experiences with thousands of people for decades now, you start, and I love the passion and how you explain the phenomena that is emergence and how there's an intelligence that is bottom up rising from a collective group of individuals and beings. And it seems as though this intelligence that has a structure to consciousness is far vaster than anything in our analytical mind could conjure up. And so,
Thank God.
yeah, seriously. So what do you make of the phenomena that is emergence as humanity starts to become more empowered and wake up to their true nature? What do you feel like is being birthed through us?
Wow. I mean, this is game time. I mean, this is really game time. And because everything around us that's challenging us in so many ways, it's so easy to fall into survival and to live in stress. And when you're in survival and stress, the only thing that matters is you. So you see separation that is created amongst communities. And as a side effect of that, everybody looks different or is different than you, and there's less trust, and there's no emergence. In fact, there's everything but that. There's a lot of competition and there's a lot of need. If you can get a group of people together and you can give them new information about themselves and empower them to contemplate it, to repeat it, to understand it, to learn it, to wire it in their brain, have them choose to do something with it, give them the conditions and the environment where they feel safe enough to try it out, give them numerous opportunities to connect, numerous opportunities to overcome themselves, numerous opportunities to continuously believe in themselves and apply. Sooner or later, they're going to have the experience of what you're talking about, right? And the experience then, as I said, you embody the truth of it emotionally, right? That's the game, that's the payoff, right? The emotional experience. It turns out that emotion somehow, the experience and the behavior and the choice is signaling behavior-dependent genes, experience-dependent genes, and a whole host of other genes that changes the body to look like the person's literally in a different life. So as I said, the collective then, when people behave in the same way and they're exposed to the same information, they evolve together. And when you see the flock of birds, the starlings, or the school of fish, there's no leader that everybody is following. That would be incidental. Everybody is leading. It's not a top-down phenomenon, it's a bottom-up phenomenon, which means in order for us to create a new consciousness, you're a representation of the whole. And if you change enough people, you can change the world, right? So person by person, if you want greatness and you want love, then every single relationship that you should have in your life should be a reflection of that intention. And all of the sorrow, all the pain goes away. And a part of us must die then that is not love, or anything that's not love in us must die. And that's the difference between knowing the path and walking the path. So get people out of survival and the body's no longer tormented by the addiction. The side effect is called joy. And the side effect of that is called self-love. That's the absence of the addiction. Energy immediately moves into the heart, and then you see a transcendental thing occur amongst the collective. And we now know that people change people. So you get a collective group of people that's retreated from their lives and not seeing the same people, going to the same place, doing the same things, having the same experiences, filling their brain with knowledge and information, applying that information for 7 days. And there's an emergent consciousness that's created, that's reflected in every single study that we do. And nobody's so special to be excluded. 84% of the people in the collective, we draw their blood, they're advanced meditators, we put them in the presence of any cancer cell. And there is a diminishing of energetic function in the cancer cell. 84% of the tribe has information in their blood that's a reflection of a greater level of wholeness. Like, that is an emergent biology. and then get somebody on the stage. You saw one. I mean, she had a brutal past. I mean, you can't tell me any longer your past is too brutal for you to change. This person was attempted murder when she was 4 years old. She was molested by her stepfather. She had everything happen to her you could possibly imagine. Still tried to live her life, worked out for 6 hours trying to get the panic attacks to go away. 30 plus hours a week. She timed herself in full-on panic mode, night terrors. No pharmaceutical, no psychiatrist, no drug, no nothing, no diet, nothing was changing her. She stands on the stage, and she is the example of truth. She has no suicidal tendencies any longer. She's a happy person. She's free. She doesn't have any panic attacks. All her health condition went away. She's talking, and we're looking out in the audience. And I'm looking at 2,200 people in Cancun, and everybody's leaning in. Everybody's looking at her because she's speaking the truth. And there's somebody shining their light so someone else can shine. She broke through a certain level of consciousness or unconsciousness that said that this is the truth. And invariably, if that person could overcome her past, so many people that were complaining about whatever it was, if they were truly on the path, they would be like, oh my God, if she can change, I can change. And just like an infection spreads amongst the community and creates disease, all of a sudden you see wellness, you see health, you see generosity, you see all these wonderful things emerge in the collective. And there's a footprint in consciousness for someone else to step in. And we've had 5 people at a week-long event step out of a wheelchair. Like, I didn't plan that. I was more surprised than anybody. 2 blind people at one event. What about 1 blind person? 2? 5 people with Raynaud's syndrome. Like, it just becomes infectious, right? So that's why I'm so intentional with our youth community. I want them to grow up. I want them to grow up at our events and see that healing is normal. I want that to be part of their belief. Like, they've witnessed enough people heal from all cancers, all kinds of things, in bones and organs. Like, I want that to be their belief. I want that to be normal for them. So there are footprints in consciousness. And in a time right now of extremes and severe polarity, it's so easy to default into survival and take for yourself. And this is the time where we have to create community. That means then, when everybody is in fear, that's the time to show courage. When everybody's in lack, that's the time to give. When everybody else is throwing stones and judging, that's the time to show compassion and consideration. And when everybody else is rushing and competing to get to the top, that's the point to stand still and draw the experience to you. And yes, in the beginning, it will feel unnatural. But if you keep doing what feels unnatural, sooner or later we become supernatural, and that's the game, right? And so then you see that in people when you walk into your life. I want this work not to be about you or anybody telling people you need to be more emotionally intelligent, you need to open your heart. I don't want people to be philosophers. I want them to say, look, I want to show you what happiness looks like. I want to show you what greatness looks like. I want to show you what abundance really looks like. Like, there are people in our work that become super abundant. Of course they're going to give. That's what abundant people do. They have more than they need, right? So there is an emergent consciousness that's taking place. And for the incredible number of crazy things, at least from what I'm witnessing in the world that's going on, there's some really wonderful things as well that speak to hope, that people actually are greater than they think, more powerful than they know, more unlimited than they can ever dream. And all I offer people is my greatest understanding of the truth and numerous opportunities to experience it, nothing more.
Those numerous opportunities to experience it is so profound in how it activates the light of awareness when people go back home into their daily lives and they encounter the darkness of unconsciousness, and then they become a candle flame. They become the light that illuminates darkness wherever they go, and they become a part of that new earth that's being birthed.
Yeah.
It's said many times that where there is no vision, the people will perish. And right now, the vision and the story and the mythos of separation is propagated on a wide scale. Says that we are separate, we are very individualistic, and in that understanding, you have to be in the vibration of fear. And what you are doing, what many people are waking up to, is being a true leader in the new paradigm, in the new story, where this old, outdated paradigm of separation is dying out and a new one is being birthed. But we're still in this time between stories where the old hasn't fully fell off and the new hasn't fully yet emerged. But what a ride, what a beautiful time to be born, where we get to choose to be stewards of that new earth and new dawn. And the last thing that I would love for you to share on, man, is the power of that enlightened leadership. I feel like we are desperate for more conscious, awakened leadership on the planet right now.
Yeah, I mean, well, we'd have to talk about really some of the great qualities of leaders, right? I mean, leaders are defined by a vision of the future that's inclusive to everyone, like that has to do with prosperity and abundance and equality and learning and education and ingenuity and inventions and solving the problems of the world, not for self-interest, but because we're a species that lives on the world, on this earth, and that somehow there are solutions to everything. So if you want to control people, control their emotions. And if you control their emotions, you can control their attention. I think it's time for us to wake up, really, and look past all of that and see that there are better ways to do things. And leadership really should be leading from the heart, because when you lead from the heart, you consider the whole. That's what it is. And when you consider the whole, then that means you have to really start thinking about the feeling of what everybody will experience when we arrive at that vision. And the feeling should be inclusive, that there is evolution, that there is growth. And I think about this all the time, because so many things are falling apart, whether it's the economy, whether it's the political system, whether it's journalism, whether it's education, whether it's the environment, medicine, everything looks like it's kind of coming apart at the seams. And I think if the old is dying away, we can't create the same thing again. We have to really do something much better and much different. And I think it isn't necessary to try to fix the culture. I think it's better to provide something better for people, and people will naturally leave that that kind of consensus reality and join another one. And I think this is a time where you can't vandalize and you can't steal, and that's what people do when they're in survival. We got to come together and say, look, we got to look out for each other in a very different way. It goes so against how we've been programmed biologically.
It seems as though the voices are here and they're multiplying rapidly. And just like you shared, it reminds me of Bucky Fuller's quote about not being able to fight outdated systems, but build new ones that make the old ones obsolete.
Yeah, I mean, and what a great time, because reality is not images and stimulation. And for a lot of people, it is. And so I think everybody has to get their head in the game, like their head and their heart in the game here in 3D reality, and start showing the world really what love does, or what greatness looks like, or what nobility is, or what honor and strength is. It's in us. It's just time to demonstrate it. Get enough people to demonstrate it. I think you can make big changes in the world.
The last thing I'd love for you to share is for the listeners that have made it to 2.5 hours in this conversation. Clearly, they're interested in what we're talking about here. As we realize that a collective is made up of many different individuals, and you're speaking to going on our own awakening journey, and we see our own purpose, dharma, our puzzle that fits into the greater whole that is unique to us, like a thumbprint is unique to everybody. We all have an expression of how we can show up that is unique on this planet. Any words of advice you have for people, perhaps through the lens of how you've unlocked it in your own life, to continue to cultivate our capacity to listen to that inner voice and intuition that's helping us blossom and discover that dharmic purpose to share with the world?
Yeah, you got to take time. You got to take time for yourself. I mean, you cannot do it unless you sit in peace. You have to be able to find a time where you set your cell phone down, you power down all your technology, and, you ask yourself, like, what do I know? Or, have the contemplative process, to really start thinking about what you do know and what you want to understand better. I think it's so important for us to make time for ourselves to practice. And the knowledge that we gain is the forerunner to the experience. And we just discovered the more people understand what they're doing and why, the how gets easier. So if you're on the journey, fill your brain with information and knowledge. Information is power, and it's self-empowering when it's about you, right? And then do something with it. I was just talking to my son about this the other day. I mean, knowledge without experience is philosophy. The experience without knowledge is ignorance. We got to marry the two in some way. So to trust our intuition, we got to get out of our analytical mind. And if it takes you 2 years to get there, it's worth it. If the heart resets the baseline for trauma in the brain, then you got to stop feeling resentment and learning how to start feeling love. That means you got to make different chemicals, and that's not something you may do overnight. But if you understood, like if I do some deep breathing and it slows my brain waves down, and I know that if where I place my attention is where I place my energy, if I put my attention on the heart, I can begin to awaken the center. If I can move out of survival and the sympathetic into the parasympathetic nervous system, let me practice doing that. Assign meaning to the act, you'll produce an outcome. I think people have become impatient because of, they're so used to clicking on something in Amazon Prime and getting it, the next day. Like if you're really going to create reality in an unconventional way, you got to practice. You got to get practice getting beyond yourself. And I think knowledge is the great, catalyst for the experience. So if you're truly going to trust yourself and trust your intuition, if you're truly going to find the place to be kind and considerate and caring in your life, there's just a part of you that you're going to have to leave behind. And when I interview people that do walking meditations that heal in one walk, I always say to them, what the heck happened to you? And they say, I just decided who I was going to leave behind. It's the overcoming process that is the becoming process. The person who's sick, who has the belief that they only have a certain amount of time to live, that's because somebody told them that. And when they had the diagnosis and they felt the emotion, it created a long-term memory, and that information made it all the way in there. Okay, so I got to change that belief. Oof, I got to believe something else. That's not easy, So it may be a good idea to watch testimonials on our website. I know we have over 800 of them. They're great stories. They're good stories. Like, and start really going, oh my God, if she can do it, I can do it. Okay, that's the belief. Okay, so now I got to stop thinking this way, right? Because thought over and over again is a belief. I got to start thinking this way. So with intention, with attention, I'm going to remember to think this way, and I'm going to remember not to think this way. Okay. All right. The person who heals also says, okay, I can't act this way. I can't behave this way. I got to change my behavior. So how do I want to behave? This is fundamental. This is not that hard. Rehearse it, like we talked about. Behave that way. The hard part is feeling the emotion your entire day. The body wants to drop down into its most common denominator. That doesn't mean you have to walk around as a fanatic, being a positive thinker. But the person who heals understands that if I feel this emotion and my body is so objective that it doesn't know the difference between the experience and the environment that's creating that emotion and the emotion that I'm creating by thought alone. And it's the environment that signals the gene. I learned that. The end product of the experience in the environment is the emotion. If I feel this emotion, could I signal genes ahead of the environment? I'm going to intentionally signal the gene ahead of the environment when I feel that emotion. Turns out 100% of the people actually did it. So why is that essential? Because information over and over again, learning the information, applying it, practicing it, getting into it, getting beyond the I can't, it's too hard, I want to quit. That's going past that point is where the magic happens. Going past that point, we've discovered, is when the brain changes the most. So you have to be your own life coach. You have to be your own master, right? And making time out of your busy day to be a creator, to overcome some aspect of yourself. It is the overcoming process. That's the becoming process. The person who's sick, who says, I don't feel like it. My body doesn't feel very well. They do their meditations anyway. The person that says, I'm doubting today, they don't go, they overcome their doubt. The person who says, I'm living in so much fear because the doctor told me I'm going to die, they surrender to love instead of fear. That's the overcoming process. They could say, I'm too busy. I got too many things to do. I got kids, I got job, whatever. They find the time. So they make the time, and it's the overcoming that is the becoming process. That's the David versus Goliath aspect of ourselves. It takes an enormous amount of energy. It takes an enormous amount of awareness, but certainly everybody who's done that looks back at their disease or looks back at their problems and conditions in their life, and so many of them say, I would have never changed. I would have never been this happy if I didn't have that disease. That was the catalyst for me to become someone else. So they're no longer victimized by their disease. They've overcome it, and they're ready for their next experience.
Joe, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and experience here on the Know Thyself podcast today. The drive that we all have to know ourselves, and the courage to be ourselves, and the places for information like this and wisdom for yours to be shared is just, I'm so grateful for it. And the very last thing I just would love for you to riff on, if you'd like, is this emergent conscious field that is coming through us, right, in our own individual process. It's leading us somewhere. As Earth 2.0, if you want to call it that, is being revealed. What does that look like for you? What is your vision of the new Earth and how it expresses itself?
God, I hope everybody realizes the divine lives within them, and everybody is part of oneness, and we treat each other the way we want to be treated. I think that is so essential. To show up as the example in the world. And so I'm just a guy that's on the journey, that has a lot of questions, that loves the opportunity to evolve in some way. But I want it to empower people. I want people to be empowered by the idea that everybody is a creator in their life. Everybody can come together and do it. So the message, of course, is, my God, there's a divine quality within every human being, and the only way that you could see it is to become it.
Thank you so much for sharing your becoming process with us.
And you're welcome.
And I just appreciate you, and it's been lovely to get to know you more and more. And yeah, man, just last words for where people can find anything that you want to point them towards, the website, the doc, anything else?
Well, the documentary, just came out, and I think it's a great balance between some of the science that we've discovered about human potential, with peer-reviewed scientists that were, as I said, skeptics in the beginning, and some wonderful testimonials of people that have actually healed themselves and healed their lives in some way. And for a person who's new to this, that's skeptical, science does an amazing job. I had one of our corporate trainers text me, and she said, both of my brothers are physicians. My one brother is the leading robotics surgeon for kidneys. He said he saw the documentary, and he said, I got to learn how to meditate. The science is that good. So the documentary is a great way to just get an exposure to like what we do at our week-long events. There's plenty of resources, like there's progressive workshops that, kind of are immersive online course. There's the formula, which is a little bit easier to get through. But just drjoedispenza.com. People can start just about at any level. And the books too, yeah.
Incredible. Again, thank you so much. And thank you to your team who make a wild event feel seamless, and flawless, when I know that's only born as a byproduct of a lot of attention to detail and hard work, and just really, really special. And thank you for the invitation to come out and experience it. It was really, really potent.
Yeah, I was so happy to see you out there. I was so happy to see you in the audience. So thanks for coming.
Yeah, I saw you on the beach and the walking meditation.
I was watching you.
Yeah. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Know Thyself podcast. Everywhere you guys can find the doc at sourcethefilm.org will be linked down in the description below. Thank you for doing the work. Thank you for being on the journey. And until next time, be well.